Let's see here. I think I'm live. Well, I thought I would be. Oh, yeah, there it is. Well, it just takes a little time to synchronize. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Yeah, this one was kind of short notice because I was actually working on something else entirely. I'm doing like a few things at once right now, research-wise. Mostly to do with really kind of similar topics, but before I started to delve into some of the other material that might be more dry for those who are less familiar with my material, I wanted to talk about this movie or it's a short film. It's called Logorama. And I learned about this years ago. I think this was long before I ever really researched these types of topics. And I was still in the wireless industry, if I remember. Yeah. It was a couple years before I left the wireless industry. So I was really still kind of immersed in my career and I hadn't really researched a lot of these topics yet. And even at the time that I watched it, sometimes I would just notice things because, again, it's kind of hard not to notice your last name and things connected to you or that would be familiar to you. And especially when you see it in repetition over and over again, it's almost like it just seems to be hinting at something. But of course, at the time, I'm thinking, who the hell am I? Why would that even be in there? I guess it's just a funny synchronicity, right? And so I'm not sure if I can get away with playing the film or not. Probably not. I'd probably get copyright struck. But I guess I could put it up in the background. Maybe that might be a good way to start things out. And hang on here. Mm, There it is. All right. I say, and ever seen the animated short film Logorama? Whoever made this knows something. So I don't want it to play too loud. In fact, I'll probably just opt to mute it entirely so that I don't trigger anything. But I'm just going to kind of have this playing on the sidelines here so you can kind of get an idea of what the film is like. It's pretty interesting. It's basically just like it's less than 15 minutes, I think, or so, or I think it's about that. And it's nothing but corporate logos. And so hopefully this doesn't trigger any alarms or anything like that. I think the way that I'm going about doing it, it should probably be safe. But you can see there's my last name. It kind of appears on the screen in repetition. And not just there in the opening intro, it says Cruise America on, the logo for that company. I believe that logo you see on the side of the car is a So really quick, I put together some slides here, so I'll just deviate away from the animated portion of this and just go right into these slides. So I put 2000 Logorama has clues that made me kind of go WTF, right? There's the Michelin men are the cops, right? So if you think about it, Michelin is a little bit like Michael, Michael. They're pretty much derivative. I would argue they're connected. I'm sure if you looked up the origins of Michelin, I'm sure Michael is in there somewhere within it. And then so you have the Michelin Michael within the Archangel system. And so again, this is sort of like one of your clues that by using Michelin men being inside the Cruise logo car, which I'll show you here. That's them right there inside the Cruise logo car. There's basically the guys that are in the car chase are two Michelin men inside this car that says Cruise. Now, again, if you're familiar with my material, I've done extensive material on Chevy Chase and things to do with bioenergetics. my own connection to my family's like kind of like secret Hollywood connections and things like that, especially relative to camera technology that can modify people's faces. We're talking pre-computer generated imagery, face masking. This would just be things that did optic bend. There might have been some computer generated. um, there probably was actually. There probably was some degree of that in addition to it. It just wasn't commonly known. It was something that was probably being used behind the scenes. Because I've even seen articles going all the way back to the 70s and 80s that showed people making digital modifications to still images. So I'm certain somebody back then would have figured out, some pretty sophisticated forms of face masking that we just didn't have available to us within the population from a digital standpoint until the digital evolution occurred within our country. But obviously, there were people that were using this type of digital um, uh, face alterations going way back. I can show you some examples, folks. Of course, the burden of proof on some of them is a little bit like, how would you prove it for some of these cases? But at the same time, like a lot of things that I'll show you when I'm trying to like highlight cases of things like that that happen. For example, there'll be an actor or an actress who appears as their normal selves, like they have a real face that they use in daily life, and most of the time, who they are on camera is fairly close to that. Hang on. Oh, there it is. Needed some water. But not always. And again, the use of prosthetics to make a nose look longer, to make eyes look different, using optic bend at a time where you could just use some different lenses to sort of make the faces look different. There was a lot of different options they had available to them, even going back into black and white television. And so, what I've uncovered, at least from what it looks like to me, based on quite a bit of research that you'd have to go into hours and hours and dig into my material to find, but there just seems to be a connection to certain portions of my family in this camera technology, both the cinematographers and the camera people that would have been central to keeping a secret like this, wherein somebody's got to aim the camera and have the equipment that makes the modifications. And then there would have to be a network of people that agree, that they're going to work side by side with people that are, quote, altered or changed in some way in the process of the filmmaking, and they'll agree to keep the secret, meaning to say that these aren't people that run around going like, oh yeah, these other few people that I was in this movie with, those aren't real people. They use some masking to make them who they are. No, those people just sort of get to sort of like live in the perceptions of everybody. You can go to IMDb and it says, yeah, this person with this incredibly fake sounding name and history does in fact exist, and that was the way they were brought up. And in actuality, no, it's just a completely made up character as much as it is a fiction in any film. But different actors who have real faces and likenesses get to share oftentimes one fake actor. So one actor can effectively belong to a few different actors who share similar facial traits, and they just use, and nowadays they just use digital masking to make the everything complete. And all it does is it's going to map, the eye movements, the mouth movements, etc., to match them up with the fake face. Anyways, I don't want to go too deep into that, but that's why I think that there is such a secret that's kept both from me and from quite a few people that, would find this material to be a little bit strange and abstract. It's because I come from a little bit of a different perspective on this. Both me not having any knowledge of it until recently, and even then still not having a lot of the what do you want to say, the information's there. I can show you how it all leads, one thing leads to another, but absent a complete confession aside from just sort of tacit admissions. So but anyways, you'll see here this film that was basically won an Oscar for, I think, the best animated short in 2010. There are some people in it that are pretty good, like creators within the film industry, although I think it's a French production. One of the characters in this animated short is a couple of Pringles cans, and one of them is original flavor and one is hot and spicy. And the original flavor can is voiced by the director David Fincher. This is where it gets even weirder, because those unfamiliar, David Fincher is in fact the director of the Zodiac film, the one that was made back, I think, around 2007 or so. That stars Jake Gyllenhaal. I think Mark Ruffalo's in it. Who else? Chloe Savini, June Diane Raphael. Oh yeah, Robert Downey Jr. I gotta forget him. But there's a lot of actors in it, some very iconic actors, and so to me, it's a very strange correlation that of all the people that you would be recognized inside the cast list, which is mostly foreign, that one of the only American voices and names that are inside this film that's used is in fact one David Fincher. Not only did David Fincher make the Zodiac film, David Fincher also directed The Game. The Game is about what do you want to call it, the falsification of events in a hyper realistic way using a team of people who would be consistent with those like crisis actors and Hollywood special effects teams that are basically hired by the rich and elite to create very realistic, incredibly realistic, to where the person actually experiences a good deal of trauma while going through it because it looks so realistic, but they never actually come fully to harm. They're brought very close to harm in many cases, but it's always controlled and nothing ever happens to them. That's another David Fincher film. So to me, it's the fact that like I've done quite a bit of analysis and commentary on David Fincher's work in particular. I've discussed the Zodiac film very frequently, his connection to it, his overall body of work. A lot of David Fincher's work is really relevant for a lot of reasons, and I do think he's an extremely talented director. So I don't have a strong opinion on what David Fincher's intentions are. I just recognize that David Fincher has a lot of talent. I mean, that's the best thing I can tell you. He's extremely, whatever. So, all right. So the car logos on the within this film, as you can see. If you start watching this about a few minutes into it, as the car chase ensues and they begin pursuing Ronald McDonald, who's robbing one of the restaurants, and starts shooting at everybody in the crowd, it says there's a Cruise Records logo on the side of the car. Again, I'll point out that it says Angel Low, Angel next to Ghostbusters logo. To me, the fact that they not only put Angel Low there, but they also put what do you want to call it, the Ghostbusters logo, is very telling. It's a sign of that there's GB and CR, GB next to the CRUZ. If you can kind of look in there. In fact, let me zoom in on that. See what I'm saying here? Like if you pay attention to what they might have been signaling, you can see that underneath the Angel Low is GB for Ghostbusters. That's the Ghostbusters logo. So Ghost is G, Busters is B, Ghostbusters. So GBCRUZ, Gabe Cruz, Angelo. Now, why that aligns? I don't know. I mean, I really do think, guys, that there are people that have some degree of access to timeline technology that know something, and that's what this is really all about. And that they must have recognized that I understand something relative to the 33-degree energy lines that exist from locations where films are made, how that feeds into the Fibonacci sequence, the spiral, the infinite spiral, how all the plasma binds to the earth. It's trippy. I think that there's people that know this and they understand it, but they just have trouble articulating it. And I guess because I have a crude understanding of all these topics myself, I wasn't like formally educated, but I did have 20 years of frequency and radio frequency wireless industry experience. I was able to sort of begin to understand earth energy relative to why corporate logos hold so much power and why they're so important, why they're used, what an icon really is when you get past it, what the occulted science is behind the use of logos, icons, and corporate logos. And this really started to become very, very freaky to me because the last couple years I started to report more from Southern California and Hollywood, a place that I absolutely cannot stand being in and going to. I really, really don't like going to Southern California overall. I really try to avoid California as a state if I can help it. But again, having a lot of family there, I know things about California. I have a personal understanding of some of the history there relative to the secret Hollywood connections that very few people are aware of when it comes to the cinematographers, the camera people that would have been like when you look at the credits, for example, and you kind of see where it says like camera technology by Panavision or camera rentals by Leonetti Chapman. Well, let's think about that one. Leonetti. Well, Leon Oskin is the one that I'm telling people effectively is sort of like the godfather, the secret godfather, the Don Corleone of Hollywood, as far as I can tell. It was Leon Oskin. And I think the reason why Leon Oskin, the actor, was so huge was because he was best at keeping the secret about himself. He had a normal persona, he had a regular life, but he was also General Burkhalter on Hogan's Heroes. And when he wasn't playing a character as an actor, he seemed to be very active, if you ask me. Again, I don't have proof of this, guys, except it's more than circumstantial, but I don't have like the smoking gun that shows like a person's like signature saying that this happened. Okay. So, but it's close to my family. And from what I can tell, the fact that my family lived like 1 mile away from Kaiser Steel and a whole bunch of these projects that I can tell are connected to my family and directed by people in my family under code names, ciphered names. Well, that facility where a whole bunch of these movies were made, like Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Nemesis, Hell Comes to Frogtown. There's a lot of B films that they did there. It was 1 mile away from my father's front door. And again, this would be probably a lot of the family that was connected to some of the Hollywood things behind the scenes. Again, I'm not saying all of them or even most of them. I think it was a very small number, but there are some people that are in there that seem to have an awareness of what these cameras are as far as the technology goes and their ability to modify people's faces and change their appearances. A good example of this, guys, like how they do these things both in post processing it or in real time. And I don't want to ruin it, but watch the ending of the remake of The Manchurian Candidate. Just make a note of that. I'm not going to play it for you here because I would ruin it. They did a remake of The Manchurian Candidate with Denzel Washington. And if you watch the very end and kind of see how they digitally modify some footage to make it look like one person went someplace that did not, they basically swap a guy's face out before digital masking was really a huge thing in our country. And you can see it all happen. They basically take one guy's security footage, remove his head, and paste somebody else's into it. Again, guys, I know I'm kind of going all over the place here, but remember, my connection also goes back to the Silva bloodline within my family, and that I noticed that Henry Silva was in the original Manchurian Candidate. So I think that there was some degree of signaling within the remake to kind of help people understand that. And I think that that's what this is really about. I think the reason why a guy like David Fincher would just be a simple voice inside a 10-minute, 15-minute, like, animated film like this was probably for a reason. It was probably because there was some signaling of things. So again, I do a lot of things that are more energetic or what might be considered things that are sort of paranormal in nature, though I don't really classify it that much as paranormal. I prefer like bioenergetic science because I don't really feel like it's that abstract any longer. I just think that it's that people won't accept it straightforward, right? As anything but sort of quote paranormal. But it really is getting down to a tangible, measurable science. Some of the things that I'm discussing here relative to how things like these exact films and these corporate logos, when placed into our collective hive mind, the collective consciousness, in repetition, it begins to feed them power and it gives them more energy and the ability to actually, how do I say it? It makes the energetic links that bind all of these different things, especially when you place them all together in a film like this. All the people that watch this and absorb this, you're creating these sort of loops of cybernetic connections that they're all binded to. So it's enough that we already see these in daily life constantly. All these restaurants, all of these record companies, all of these, internet companies, whatever they're using for these things, right? So I continue on here. I put the car logos and Logorama continued. Angelo plus GB, the Ghostbusters logo, would equal Gabriel. Again, guys, remember in the Archangel system, the angels effectively are the three main ones: Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. So I think by making them Michelin Man, they're telling you Michael, they're highlighting Michael, okay, as the Michelin. And then by putting angel, they're telling you Michael, Gabriel, Raphael. Now, the reason why I think it's Gabriel specifically, though, is because of that Ghostbusters logo that you see right down here. GB, Gabe Cruz. And I go by Gabe most often. Trippier, I did a lot of footage on Chevy Chase that's connected to my energy research and my genetics, especially when it comes to the Silva bloodline. In fact, guys, I got to be straight up with you. If you really take a good look at Chevy Chase, especially like late 70s, early 80s time frame, and you see, I would say, I would say even 70s, 60s, 70s era, no more like 50s, 60s, 70s era, no, closer to 60s, okay, of Henry Silva, especially around Ocean's 11 when he did that film. He does look quite a bit like Chevy Chase. You could see how the two could be related, possibly uncle, nephew, younger brother, however that might work. Because I don't think that their ages are that far apart, but far apart enough to where they could be father and son or uncle, nephew, or something, that type of relationship. All right. So I put the car logos in Logorama. You'll notice that they put a Chevy in the logo. So on top of it being Gabe Cruz, the angel, you also have the Chevy logo, and that they're in a car chase. Okay, Chevy in a car chase, a Chevy chase. Now again, this is where I'm going to, and rather than just like, for those of you who are unfamiliar with my material, rather than me just saying these things, now I'm going to show you actually the tangible things that kind of like show you that, yeah, it's a thing. I mean, these are the articles. You can now see it. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me start with the. Yeah, I'll do this one first. I'll be back. Hey, everybody. This is a ziggurat here in California. I'm not sure exactly technically what this area is called. To be honest with you, I just located on the map, and it's had a lot of different names, but it's located kind of near Irvine area in California. And it's relevant to me because this film was where there's quite a few films I think that they did here, but in particular the film Deal of the Century, starring Chevy Chase, Gregory Hines, and Sigourney Weaver. And it was about defense contractors. It was about sort of like the competition between various defense contractors in competition to sell weapons to various countries around the world. And I learned about this building that it was actually built for Rockwell International. And then because it was around the time of the Vietnam War, some of the business was winding down, and so it never got occupied for any actual defense projects. And so now it serves various functions. It's, a general purpose office building, but it's been a federal building at times. It's done, various types of companies or whatever. But the point is, a ziggurat as a structure, what it represents esoterically is highly relevant. And the shape and the stacked pyramid nature of it, the way the cornerstones are aligned, very relevant. This one in particular has 33.33 degree alignments, 333.33 degree alignments, and I believe a 30.33 degree alignment. It's pretty interesting. And it was through this exact ziggurat, okay, and watching Deal of the Century, that gave me sort of the etheric link using the 33 and the third degree line. It gave me that etheric link to start researching an area that was well beyond up there in Northern California, but north of here, near like the Victorville, Apple Valley. Actually, it's Lucerne Valley area. So when you follow the line that goes from this ziggurat right here, okay, at 33 degrees, 33.33 degrees from the top, it winds up going across the valley up into California and goes across the Twin Peaks, Lake Arrowhead, kind of Big Bear Lake area near, is it Skyline or something like that's the name of the town? And then it keeps going on until you're in the Lucerne Valley area, and that's exactly where they filmed Buckaroo Banzai in the Eighth Dimension.
which is about space-time manipulation. And if you know anything about the ziggurat of Ur in Iraq, a very similar concept and construction and everything like that, then you'll know the connection to stargates. More on that later.
Yeah, so that's an article that I did when I was at the ziggurat. It's like called Laguna something. God, I wish I remembered it. Anyways, I can't remember right now. But yeah, there's a ziggurat there, and so I'd been traveling all through this desert area, kind of near Victorville and Barstow, and then over to the west of there because there's a whole bunch of areas where that Hollywood likes to use out there to film in. And part of what my research involves is effectively finding out how it's weird. So like I just showed you on maps there, like how lines correlate and overlap with one another. That's a big part of what I do. I basically go to like, if there's a film that I think is very relevant and what happened there is very relevant, I go to where one of the main scenes of the film is, or that I know is geographically, it just has to resonate. It has to kind of glow, I guess you could say a little bit within my perception. It has to be something that really kind of rises to the surface and makes me think about it more. And in those cases, I'll actually go in and I'll find out, like, okay, where did this movie get filmed? Where was the scene done? And then I draw on Google Earth. I have hundreds of these locations mapped out and all these energy lines mapped out. I'll drop an anchor where one of the scenes is filmed, and then I begin drawing 33-degree lines, 333-degree lines, 213-degree lines, 123-degree lines. And if you understand what I'm doing there, I'm basically doing them in opposites from the central anchor point. So it's a little bit like you're drawing a 33-degree line all the way around the world, like going in, or you're taking a 333-degree line and going all the way around the world. And that's what all of these lines are basically doing. I don't always stretch them clear around the globe, but most of the time that I do. And then if I'm really noticing tons and tons of like synchronized information sets in places that I never expected them to be, and you'll find this is like some bizarre form of remote sensing that I've discovered. You'll really start to find some very strange real life data correlations just start to rise to the surface, and you kind of go like, am I really experiencing this? Because how am I getting this information like this? This just feels like somebody from a whole nother timeline dropped this here for me, like it was designed for me to find. It's bizarre. And I do think there's an explanation for that, both that it could be possibly done for that exact reason. Because again, at some point, guys, you have to realize that even if you don't accept that it exists today, someday it probably will. Correct? Can you at least agree on that? If timeline technology doesn't exist today, which is to say the ability to at least send information from one time, say 1 year, to another time and point, if even if it's simply data or a digital packet that can be decoded or deciphered from one time to another, a compressed file from one time to another that unpackages and then they can like review it or something like that. I don't know. But however they're able to do it, I do think for quite a number of decades now, especially within the Hollywood defense industry infrastructure, there's been awareness of things that have been coming probably from devices like CERN and other types of hadron colliders that deal heavily with both technology, artificial intelligence in tandem with the manipulation of Earth resonance. That in tandem with like literally the manipulation of magnetic fields within the Earth core. I think when you take these two things, you begin manipulating energy fields within the magnetic whatever, and then you take the collective hive mind, which exists in a universal plasma field. It's quite a dangerous thing that you're doing here. You're actually creating artificial synchronicities that are going to be based upon the collective hive mind and what we all absorb on a daily basis, which is the vast majority of us, at least in Western civilizations, involves corporate logos. And that's why I found this short film so fascinating from a bioenergy standpoint, as far as like, how do we actually wind up getting a synchronicity to exist to begin with? Because it seems like they're on overdrive now. Well, they kind of are. And I think it's that way because it's our exposure to corporate logos, icons, and in ways that was never before. And I think that there are those within the marketing industry that have these occulted belief systems that are actually into witchcraft and things of that nature that do in fact get this. And so when they make an ad campaign, the people of those beliefs, they don't do it straightforward. They do things that are very occulted. They do things that have multiple meanings. A lot of these drugs I know that are being put out on the market, especially that have commercials with them. Come on, guys, really with these drug names? Seriously? You know you have like double, triple, quadruple meanings in those drug names. They don't even match what the chemical composure of the drug is. So they're designed to actually do something more within the collective hive mind. And if people don't get hip to this, you're not going to understand why sometimes you may just want to pass on even watching some of those commercials or mute them so you don't hear them. Literally, just like see if you can turn the other way if you don't have the ability to fast forward them in some cases. I'm not trying to get that extreme with it, but I've learned to really tune it out to the best of my ability. Um, not in every case, but yeah, when I feel like it's malicious or I feel like the intention behind it is not good, then yeah, my first intuition is to try to tune it out as much as possible or reduce my exposure to it at a bare minimum so that I'm not giving away my ability to bend the plasma field to a corporation that I may or may not like. And in most cases, that's probably one that I'm not too into or not too keen to, especially if they're bombarding me with commercials while I'm trying to watch a stream. It's been sad, guys, because a lot of these things that I'm trying to do research on, almost one of the only ways you can find them is on these like free streaming services like Tubi.tv, you know. I'm not trying to advertise for them, but I do find a lot of these really bizarre films and television series like, you know, available there, like remastered high definition and everything. But there's no way I think to pay for it and subscribe to it without commercials. So you're just subjected to this, you know, constant series of like 4 or 5 commercials that are just like way too long and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, kind of like my presentation right now. I apologize. But yeah, so let me get back to the material here relative to the Chevy Chase thing. So again, so that you don't, those who are just joining here, I'm talking about the film Logorama, and it's basically I'm kind of decrypting like why they made the decision to have a central character here. These two Michelin men drive the Angelo next to the Ghostbusters GBCRUZ Gabe Cruz thing, okay, and the fact that they chose a Chevy Chase, having a Chevy vehicle because there's a Chevy logo on the front of this Cruise car. Why would they have the Chevy in a Chase? Well, I think that was by design. I think they were signaling Chevy Chase. So I said that I did an article about a connection to Chevy Chase and this exact type of symbol used through the You Can Call Me Al video with Paul Simon. So here's the thing, folks. So I think that there's times where I think there's a couple things going on right now. I think sometimes there are synchronicities that are occurring because of this bizarre process that we're all subjected to that none of us really opted into, where we're absorbing common symbols and it creates cybernetic hive mind connections that otherwise never would have existed until the mass media and global mass media, and especially ones that exist in such, you know, quick repetition where we're all absorbing the same thing at the same time globally. I mean, you know, on internet streams, and then the advertising that's added to those internet streams. Like the people that have the most viewers, they get it most globally, that have their ad logos in there. I promise you, the cybernetic links that resonate from those logos are very, very powerful, and they have other connections that the collective population for the most part is unaware of. You're not even conscious of how these things are linking and creating synchronicities in ways that you would never probably consent to, and would probably freak you out if you started to experience them like the way, well, I know I've experienced them like this for a long time, but once I studied energetics, I began to understand it, and now I don't get as spooked out by it. I mean, every now and then, yeah, I'm kind of like, what? You know, yeah, it gets a little bit too much. But I think if you can understand like why it's happening and like have some other reasons behind intention, then yeah, I think synchronicities can occur because there is the degree of intention behind placing these logos and into our collective consciousness and making them so powerful. But it has the unintended effect, at least through us, but I think by the makers of them, it's absolutely intentional, to cybernetically link them and create more power to what they're all centrally going to, which is a series of families that own these companies, and they use the logos to feed energy. They're like sigils that are effectively like all of their names combined into these symbols, and their occult work combined into these symbols, to where every time the whole population views it, it actually gives more influence to their bloodline. It's a little bit like they've done so many things to associate themselves secretly with these symbols and bind their DNA to these symbols, that in processes that most people are unaware of. They just don't get how much power they're giving away to these bloodline families through the introduction of the corporate logos into their perception. So I'm not trying to make that worse with this Logorama movie. I apologize if it seems that way. And if you don't feel like watching it, don't. Maybe just look at the slides that I've shown you at most, and call it good. But I would totally understand that, guys, because I'm not trying to advertise for free for anybody. But so before I get deep into this whole Masonic 33-degree line thing, though, let me do another example of like what might have gone on with Chevy Chase. I really don't know. Maybe he would think I'm crazy for saying this. Hopefully not, because I think we at least look enough alike and have some enough similarities to where he he might at least be curious as to why these things are happening the same way that I am, because I think he's got this weird connection to Henry Silva. I think I've got a weird connection to Chevy Chase, and I think the both of us somehow have a connection to Henry Silva. And since I am from a Silva bloodline on my father's side, then yeah, it does pique my curiosity to see, like, was there some gene swapping or hiding going on, or one relative getting traded with another one that I wasn't aware of, or something like that? Because it does kind of seem like there is something where we're synchronizing. When I watch their work, both Henry Silva and Chevy Chase, it synchronizes to me. It synchronizes to the things I'm doing right at that moment, right at that time. And I can also find parallels to each other's work. I don't have slides generated on it. I haven't posted about it yet, but a great example is there's a movie called Johnny Cool that Chevy Chase did back in this, or no, sorry, Henry Silva did in the 60s, that has a matching scene in the film Fletch that Chevy Chase did in 1985. A very similar thing where they're placed into a situation where they, as the main protagonist, are on the ground level, and they're looking up at a person who has an advantage over them, who's in like a balcony on the second level, like a library balcony, like a rich home or a rich like person's library within their home. And these are two scenes that match, like the way they're filmed, the way they're shot, and even like a lot of the structure of to the advantage the person has over them. Like the theme of the scene involved like killing a person or faking a person's death, and then one person becoming the other for them, and taking on their reputation or something to that effect in exchange for money or protection. And so in the case of Johnny Cool, there was a plot line like that, and just like there was in Fletch. And not only did the plots line up, but the scene where, again, they're in that library and the one person's looking down at him, and in one case it was Henry Silva and the other was Chevy Chase, the scene matches. It's almost like they were paying homage to from one to the other. And since, again, sorry guys, I was just going to keep going. You might want to keep notes if you're into these things, but and then Michael Ritchie was the guy that directed Fletch. And so that really, really, really makes me think that there's something deeper going on, just simply because Michael Ritchie was behind a lot of the films that as far as I can tell, are timeline films. Michael Ritchie did Golden Child with Eddie Murphy. He was behind some pretty. He did a movie that was very, very revealing about the human trafficking economy, and it was pretty shocking for its time. Even it's called Prime Cuts with Gene Hackman. In fact, this movie is very, very difficult to find. And the opening scene is literally a human trafficking ring that is selling young women in a like a farmer's corral. Like it's literally like it's like they're having a livestock auction, but instead of there being livestock, they literally just have all of these young ladies, like, you know, like they're animals, and then everybody's inspecting them and auctioning for them. I mean, it's like a white slavery ring. It's actually like, I mean, the types of things that Michael Ritchie did, he would sway wildly from doing a film like that to doing something like, you know, The Bad News Bears, for example. with Walter Matthau and Tatum O'Neal, and that was the original one, by the way. He did a lot of these sort of like seemingly goofy comedies. But the one that really kind of piqued my curiosity on top of all that was he also did a movie called um, Digstown. And of all things, his character's name is Gabriel Kane. I don't even know where to. I mean, I did a thing on James Woods today, actually, on the film Cop, but this article's not on that. But it's trippy because again, I was a very big James Woods fan as a kid for some strange reason, guys. Must have been a twisted 10-year-old, but I like to watch like his action movies that I really should not have been watching thematically. Um, maybe that's why even when I still was leaning more liberal, that I still was like going, "Ah, come on, you guys, like, leave James Woods alone," because they would seem to be picking on him a lot, and giving him, whatever. Like they still do. They try to like silence James Woods and shame him for his more conservative perspective and everything like that. But I kind of like that he just sort of thumbs his nose at it and just tells them all to go to hell. I really enjoy reading his posts and things like that on Twitter, even though I think they're really suppressing James Woods on Twitter, to be honest with you, because I never get notifications for his things. Like they just, and I was like, is James Woods even post anymore? Am I even, did they like unfollow me from him? And then I had to go look deeper and I was like, wow, yeah, he's like posting very frequently. I never get these messages and notifications. I wonder why that is. It was bizarre. But my guess is it's because he is very influential when his voice is heard. So those platforms will do whatever they can to silence people that are sort of like they can find that line. If you think about it, James Woods is a pretty hip conservative. Like he's a cool guy that has that perspective. He's a person that like you would actually want to go have a drink with, probably, or at least you like dig into his mind a little bit and learn how he works and things like that, just out of an intellectual curiosity. But he seems pretty cool, um, and he's played some really interesting characters and things like that. So, hey, welcome, Fred. Um, and so all right. So I'm going to do yeah, so I know I went on a whole tangent there about Michael Ritchie films and everything else like that, but it's kind of important because there does seem to be a parallel between all those things and this whole you know, um how do I say it, guys? Like, all right, I have some articles that I've done and I have some like Twitter things that I've done, but just to put it as quickly and simply as possible, because we do sort of live in a universal plasma field, and there's hemispheres of our brain that kind of create these cyclical spirals of energy, and that we exist in sort of like the vesica pisces of these two cycles of energy. Like nearly everything that we place into our pineal gland also re-radiates out. It's like sort of like the nature of the karma cycle. Like people don't always have to take it as some sort of negative thing, like that's your karma. Well, your karma is like everything. That's like saying like it's everything you put in, and it's everything that you put, it's every all of it. It's not just a little bit of it. It's not just the bad things, and it's not just the good things. I mean, karma is just the repetition of the cycle of the energy and everything else like that. So part of that includes information and the binding of information to the plasma field. And so again, what you put out returns back. And so you're able to sort of like understand in greater detail, like the meaning behind the repetition of these cycles. Like why are these energy loops so relevant? Why are anyways, guys, I'm getting a little bit off track here, um but the Chevy Chase connection in particular kind of freaked me out because it wasn't just that I had this in, because he did a lot of like Michael Ritchie films. It wasn't just Fletch and Fletch Lives. I think there was another one. Maybe it was just those two. The point is that nearly all of his things are pretty relevant. So, all right, hang on really quick. Hey everybody, I was just thinking about symbol decryption and how to interpret like the use of symbols, like why directors make color choices in music videos, why they make selections for certain, creatively, I guess, in certain circumstances. So, particularly, I wanted to highlight Paul Simon's "You Can Call Me Out," directed by Gary Weiss. It's just a song I've had in my head for a while now. It's a song that came out in the 80s, and it charted at number 44. And it's 4 minutes and 40 seconds, which I thought was really weird because I've been getting into this song right now, and I'm 44 years old at the time of this production here. So kind of weird. But anyways, I thought I'd mention that just because
that was a few years
I was
ago.
thinking about like what might be getting communicated in this video, what are the possibilities and things like that. And I thought this one is in particular kind of interesting because since I was a kid, people told me that I looked a little bit like Chevy Chase. So I thought I would just kind of put that out there, like a comparison and everything like that to kind of show you like why. People tell me even today I do, but I don't know. I don't entirely see it, but in a way I kind of do. So that's just for your own, review if you feel like there's a similarity. But point is that I noticed that he was using things like color coding of like light pink and light blue and dark blue, and that light pink and light blue are like maternity paternity colors, And then I kind of noticed that the room itself was like the color of maternity pink, and that he was wearing a light blue shirt, which is a color of maternity, and that Chevy Chase was wearing a dark blue shirt, which I thought was interesting because I thought that might be sort of a sign for something. So if you kind of follow through this video and everything like that, you kind of see like in the beginning, they kind of both go into the room, right? And they're kind of trying to squeeze in at the same time. And so they both go in to sit at their chairs and everything, with Paul Simon sitting next to the saxophone, Chevy Chase sitting next to the other instrument, the trumpet, and that they give each other kind of the secret handshake. Okay. And so you'll notice that Paul Simon kind of sits solemnly to the left, and he's not really doing much. Chevy Chase is doing all the lip syncing while Paul Simon just kind of watches him, right? So it's kind of an interesting choice. And then Paul Simon kind of gets up about 10, 20 seconds into the song and goes back into the room that they both came in through. And Chevy Chase keeps lip syncing and everything, and kind of forms a triangle with his hand. You see in the background that Paul Simon walks past with a red drum. I thought that was kind of interesting because there's a red drum in the movie The Shining. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's kind of weird because, I actually, number one, I'm a huge Stanley Kubrick fan. And also, I used to live when I was in Colorado on Overlook Drive. And then the movie The Shining, if you remember, takes place at the Overlook Hotel. And I thought, that's kind of a strange coincidence too, right? Because it just almost like there's these weird kind of connections here. So, and he keeps, and then if you notice, Paul Simon comes back into the room and he's kind of twiddling his fingers, looking a little bit concerned, while Chevy Chase keeps lip syncing to the song. And I thought it was an interesting choice that there's such a huge arrangement of brass instruments in this, but they only have the saxophone and the trumpet there. Well, I thought that might be a sign for trying to highlight the fact that there's maternity and paternity colors. So the saxophone might just be like a coded way to say sex is saxophone, or what I'm saying, like to try to communicate to you that they're discussing genders here for some strange reason. And here's why I think that why that might be happening. You'll notice here as Chevy keeps lip syncing to the song and everything like that, and waiting for Paul Simon to come back into the room, that he's sitting next to a trumpet. Well, I'm not trying to assign any specific meaning to me, except that my name, Gabriel, is the sign of an archangel. Archangels are messengers. They deliver information. They deliver things that the people should know. So I thought it was interesting that he's sitting next to a trumpet in particular, and that had like, I don't know, to me, it resonates with me personally. Okay. Just as studied symbolism and archangels and things like that. But you notice that Paul Simon comes back in the room, and now he has a penny whistle inside his pocket. Okay. And he's kind of twiddling his thumbs, and he's not saying anything. And he looks over at Chevy Chase while he's singing. Okay. Now watch as he's singing the chorus here, Paul Simon goes and starts to play the penny whistle. I looked this up specifically on the credits, and they list the instrument as a penny whistle. As he's playing the penny whistle, Chevy Chase lifts up the glass of water, takes a sip, and then notice this, he starts to set it down on the tray, but there is nothing to set it into. The water breaks. Okay. I thought that was an interesting choice, is that the water breaks, and then Paul Simon proceeds to play the penny whistle. Okay. Next to the saxophone. Then Chevy Chase starts to cross his legs and cross his hands. Paul Simon tosses the penny whistle to him, and they both start to play the trumpets. And
remember, guys, across is also translates in Spanish to cruise. Cruise is cross.
The saxophone. Okay. So they do the synchronized dance together like this for a while, playing the saxophone and the trumpet. Now, the reason why I wanted to highlight this a little bit is because there's more symbolism going on here with Gabriel's horn being part of the archangel system. Part of that is that if you look up Gabriel on Wikipedia, some of the lore behind Gabriel as an archangel is that he also carries a horn or a trumpet specifically. It's also a mathematic and an audio type concept involving now a pattern in math called Gabriel's horn, and you can look that up too, and I put a slide for it here also. So a lot of things that I discuss involve radio frequency, sound, specific concepts involving math and esoteric symbolism and esoteric communication. So this video in particular just resonated with me. So I think sometimes archaeometry just sort of happens, regardless of whatever. But it's also interesting that we kind of have a similar appearance. So I kind of wondered if we're cousins or something like that. Because sometimes that's why at a DNA level, you may just be resonating with somebody, like for whatever reason that they're doing things that are totally benign. They resonate with you. Then you'll notice that Chevy Chase drops the penny whistle the same place that he dropped the glass of water where it broke. Okay. Now, Paul Simon starts to bring in the red drum, okay, from the back of the room. All right. So into this pink room, the maternity color the maternity color is pink. He brings a red drum. Now, I wanted to highlight this because the movie The Shining involves symbolic and telepathic communication. There's scenes where the boy in the movie, Danny, is told by the owner, or rather the proprietor of the shop, that there's this thing called shining that's a little bit like clairvoyance, where people just sort of pass communication without discussing things. They do it other ways. So I think that there's something that's kind of being communicated here with the red drum specifically, because they really only have a handful of instruments, even though there's a broad section of instruments used in the album. And so you notice that after Paul Simon brings in the red drum, he's kind of sitting there solemnly, and he's kind of looking at his hands a little bit, and he's not singing, but Chevy Chase is just singing along just fine, And I thought that was really interesting. While I was watching this too, there's a couple movies that I've been watching lately because I've been kind of catching up on Chevy Chase films, which is why I thought of this to do this article. And so you notice that Paul Simon starts playing the drums again, and Chevy Chase is doing this little thing with his arms back and forth, And then Paul Simon's about to proceed to go into the bass guitar loop on this. Now, what I read on the Wikipedia entry was that they used backmasking to make this bass sound. So he played it forward, then they looped it in reverse. So it's a form of backmasking. So it's almost like they're telling you you're supposed to interpret some of this backwards. You see, the bass guitar was played forward, then backwards. So they're acknowledging backmasking because I believe that the red drum could potentially be a reference to clairvoyance, telepathic, symbolic communication, as well as The Shining specifically. They may be actually be talking about it like, hey, you're supposed to do some of these things backwards, red drum, because in the movie, that was the inside scoop there, was that the red drum was Danny's way of communicating outbound that somebody had committed a murder near him. So he starts going, red drum, because that's the only way he can process it. And then I thought it's interesting because not only did they do that, but they leave the room backwards, you see. So after playing all those instruments, they actually leave the room walking backwards, playing the instruments. He's playing Gabriel's horn. They have the penny whistle. They have the red drum. It's just interesting to me because I've just noticed that people that are of certain, blood groups and come from certain areas and things like that, they tend to sort of organically, symbolically communicate. And it's just something that resonates with me. And this one in particular, I don't know, it's a song that I've always liked. And I just remember, like, when I was a kid, just hearing about, like, 57 Chevy Bel Airs a lot, even though we never had one.
You know something? I take that back, actually, because the more I think about it, they might have also referenced the 57 Chevy truck, because I know we did have an old Chevy truck in our house when I was younger, but there was references to this sort of 57 Chevy Bel Air too. So I don't know why that was. It's just this weird memory I have from childhood, that's anchored. Anyways.
And that was like a really popular thing. So that kind of stuck out in my head, like 57 Chevy. Well, and it's trippy because I realized that I did an interview on a media outlet called Basis Project where I was number 57 on that. And so it just kind of stuck in my head that somebody used to always say 57 Chevy. I kind of look like Chevy Chase. People have told me I look like Chevy Chase my whole life, off and on. and that I have some mannerisms that are similar and things too. So I don't know. You know, maybe we're cousins or something. I don't know, but I'll put it here to take a look at it again or whatever. But yeah, you never know what could happen, right? As far as that goes. But anyways, I thought it was worth mentioning because it's a cool video. I'll leave a link to it for you to check it out yourself. And anyways, thanks for watching. Bye.
Yeah, I don't think it's that important that I play the Freemason one. I can if you guys want me to, but I'll probably skip that one for now. All right. Okay. All right, let me get back to the Twitter thing here. Now that we did that. All right. Okay. So if you go to the beginning of that Logorama, and maybe I should start to review it again while I'm talking, you'll see that the very opening scene, even this is what gets even bizarre, guys. Like, notice that it says pretty much this slide alone. It says Q French's Cruise America. Oh my God, you guys! Like, I like some of this I can't even talk about, but all that's relevant. And bizarrely enough, it's not the Q thing. In a way it is, because I've already talked about that. I mean, I have relatives that have Q level clearances that hold the cruise name. I don't have one. I never did. But I have been in some places that are pretty significant underground. I mean, that I can say with the, you know, with complete straight face. And I mean, I could explain them and where they were. And most cases I can even talk about them because they weren't a super big secret or anything like that. But yeah, there's quite a few things I did like that, you know, as far as like, you know, access to underground, but just never a Q level clearance facility. Nothing like at that level. And I've never been a member of the Department of Energy, and I've never worked at the Department of Energy or anything else like that. But I put, how about this one? The opening around 22, 23 seconds, Cruise America, adding it another time. So you can see all three logos better together in this slide. This one really tripped me out. This is where, like, once I saw this, that's why I felt like I had to do this tonight. I say you can see all three logos better together in this slide. Chevy logo and the Chevy logo in a car chase equals Chevy Chase. Angel low on the Cruise Records car, because that logo is Cruise Records, equals Gabriel Cruz. Because especially when you have the GB, the Ghostbusters logo that was next to it in the earlier slide. I put weirder is that there is an Enterprise rental car logo behind it, and much of my research involves exploits into mobile phone BlackBerry enterprise servers that are called BES, BES, or good servers. So I thought that was really freaking trippy. So it got even a little bit weirder because I put the last 2 years I did field reports from Hollywood area, as well as spent a few months staying there. You notice the Chevy Angelo cruise car stays in the entire film from start to apocalyptic finish, nearly getting crushed by the woo in the Hollywood sign, ciphered top down. So you can see in here in each slide, there's the car. It's skidding around the road. What's trippy about this, guys, is like I'll actually show you that I was on these roads. I mean, I don't think I ever got like any footage of the Hollywood sign while I was doing my articles because I just didn't care that much. But yeah, I'll show you like actually really quick. Oh yeah, here's a good one. Actually, Hollywood, I use that so much in my clips. That's probably one of the worst things I could select. That's one of the times I was out there, but that was in LA. San Gabriel Masonic Lodge. Yeah, that one might be relevant. Oh, here's a good one. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. I'm reporting from an area outside of Hollywood here. And up here is...
I got to tell you guys something really fast, and I can show you a Twitter link about this.
I knew about the chemosphere house from Body Double. I hadn't seen it in anything else that I could remember. Okay, that was Brian De Palma's movie. I do a lot of research around Brian De Palma's work, and because I think he knows a lot about energetics. This exact thing I'm talking about, I honestly think that whether he'll ever admit to it or not, or even if he doesn't know it, something's up with Brian De Palma's has an intense or what I profound awareness of how everything I'm talking about works. That I'm convinced of. He really gets it. And I'm not entirely, even though his work is extremely dark at times, I don't really consider him individually a dark person. I think whatever he's doing, I don't know, it's pretty incredible. So I try not to like and analyze whether or not the intentions are good or bad too much as I used to now. I try to just like look at it straightforward as much as I can. But man, De Palma's work is very impressive overall. Especially, I've been trying to get to see some of his earlier films that I'd never really watched before, and like he has this one called like How to Train a Rabbit or something like that, where a guy quits his job and becomes a magician. It's very encoded. Has Orson Welles in it, and one of the Smothers brothers. I think it's Tom Smothers is in it. I mean, it's very, very trippy. Um, anyways, guys. So the point was is that it wasn't until really I started watching the Outer Limits episodes the last several months that aspect linked into this part of my research. Okay, because there was an episode of the Outer Limits that was from actually the 60s, if I recall correctly. Yeah, it was filmed in the 60s that used the exact same chemosphere house that was used by Brian De Palma's Body Double film in 1984. So this film in the 60s or this television show, The Outer Limits in the 60s, used it in one episode, and then fast forward to the 80s. And what's even weirder is one of the actors that's in the episode is in one of the other movies called My Chauffeur that led me to another location in Hollywood. So it's like I was on this bizarre path, not knowing entirely why I was going from one place to another to another. And then it's weird how I find that when I actually stand foot in these areas physically, like I'm physically there, these weird synchronicities happen later with the information. Like all of a sudden it's finding its way back to me. And to me, this is also part of the karma cycle. Like everything I did here created this energy loop of information relative to, everything I mentioned in it. Brian De Palma, the chemosphere house, that part of Hollywood, the anchored location, how I was feeling at the time that it happened, what kind of energy imprint that I leave in where I was. Really, if you think about it, if I was happy, if I was sad, whatever the case might be.
Fatori-san, this is called the chemosphere or the chemosphere. This is a house that was used in Brian De Palma's film Body Double, starring Melanie Griffith and some others. And Brian De Palma, I found, is a lot of the locations that he picked in his films are very relevant esoterically. I found a lot of patterns with Brian De Palma's films, and specifically to a lot of the filming locations that he picked, the actors that he chose, and the themes of his films. And so this house in particular is kind of known as it's a pretty legendary piece of architecture here in the area. There's an elevator that takes you to the top there, and that has a view at the top there that can oversee the entire city. It's pretty remarkable. And I wanted to come out here and show it to you. I think this is about as close as I can get without going on private property, but it's pretty amazing. I think you have to agree. But yeah, I'll be probably doing a lot of revisiting of Brian De Palma locations just because I'm telling you, it's highly relevant in everything that I've been researching. And I know that his study of energetics and cybernetics is going to be probably historically relevant at some point, would be my guess, if it's not already being made known now. But lots of clues in Body Double, lots of clues in Blowout, lots of clues in Scarface. They're all full of clues.
There's the loop. Raphael, Hamlet, Othello, Raphael inside this thing. Wow, dude. I wish I could articulate this better right now. I'm actually processing it right now because I didn't even think about this. Because I said it earlier, how the loop finds its way. So Michelin tires, Gabriel is implied through the Ghostbusters logo, GBCRUZ. And then we have Raphael finding its way to us now because I followed the energy It's like following quartz when you're looking for gold. There's the 33-degree line, there's the anchor of the physical location, and then there's things that become predictable, you guys. I'm really onto something with this. Not I promise you it's not as weird as it sounds. I'm just having a hard time articulating just what I discovered even right now talking to you. But this is part of the film uh, Body Double. And so you'll see in the slides what I'm talking about here. Some of my research involves a winery in Othello that's connected to my family. I had two relatives that basically worked at this Othello winery. And again, that's in Othello, Washington. They weren't really working at the winery. They were working at a tavern in Richland, but its associated winery was in Othello. So even though it's in Richland, they're the I guess you could say the parent company would be in Othello, right on the border of Franklin and Grant County. And this is very, very close to the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, where again, our family has very strong ties to both the nuclear industry out on the surface, but secretly behind the scenes, I believe, and I've discovered there are connections to the secret Hollywood infrastructure. The Tavern, Fred, would be Tagaris Taverna on Tulip Lane. It's the one that's next to both Bernard Griffin and Bookwalter. And so if you're not familiar with my articles on that, remember Leon Oskin played Burke Halter on Hogan's Heroes. Burke Halter, Bookwalter. Why do you think it's named Bookwalter? Because I don't think that somebody's name was that. Just saying. And then Griffin's relevant to what these people do and things like that. But yeah. So you get it. And so I don't know. I mean, they've been around for a long time, all these wineries, but then, so was Leon Oskin and everything else like that. And then everything you see there on Tulip Lane at those wineries, they're all the streets around there are encoded and have these connections to this SAIC Leidos thing and the Department of Energy and all these infrastructure hacks. I mean, there's so much that's going on with the secret underground infrastructure with both energy hacking, information hacking, like getting themselves free energy, but charging everybody else for it, giving themselves private communication routes that only them and an elite class have access to, while doping everybody else's information routes on the surface and confusing all of us. They get nice, pure. Well, I wouldn't call them pure because their activities are far from pure, but they get untainted, encrypted, and everything else like that. Communication lines for one another, all using these sort of underground infrastructures, right? And so that's all kind of connected to sort of, I think, the reason why some people have been able to sort of secretly take over. They did it through infrastructure hacks. They did it by basically having an image of every single person's smartphone without them knowing it. If you had to plug your phone into commercial power, my guess is these people have backed up your cell phone and have a copy of it someplace. Everybody. Nearly everybody. That sounds far-fetched, but these people have pretty much infinite data storage. They can basically keep, and it would basically be valuable to them to every time you plug your phone into the wall. If you think about what your phone was really doing when you plug it into the wall, you've got to get hipper to this and wiser to this. I don't mean to go off topic here, but just really quick, always remember, this is why the DOE infrastructure hacks thing is a thing that people have to pay attention to. And the companies that did all this, you have to pay attention to where this all leads back to monetarily, informationally, and why they have so much shit on so many people, why they can basically blackmail and extort nearly anybody. They've got everybody's smartphones. And so what that gives them the power to do is effectively package this as a necessity to our security and military infrastructure, surveillance infrastructure, say to them like, well, we kind of have to do this. You got to know who's good and bad, But see, you're trusting the wizard behind the curtain to tell you that what's on everybody's cell phones are actually there. And that's not really smart because they're basically a mafia. And if they're going to cover for criminal activity, suddenly that person's activities will be disappear or attributed to a whole different person. They can't make activities disappear nowadays, so they find mules and patsies to draw data and geo-referencing attributions to, so they can get away with more sophisticated forms of crime within the cyber sphere of information collection. And so if you're a smart criminal, if you're an intelligent criminal, if you're a more sophisticated and organized criminal, you know that anymore that you can't just commit a crime that's going to steal a lot of money from people nowadays without getting caught, because you're going to leave behind so many digitally forensic traceable markers that it's going to lead back to you one way or the other. You'd be stupid to do a crime now, which is why I think so much of our, like what we're existing in now, is being made up. Or they're controlling the crime and effectively deciding what to prosecute. And more often than not, that's pretty much nothing. While they give us dramas, the FBI is always giving us dramas, psychodramas, plays, crisis actors that they go in and swoop in and go chase after when no one's looking for them but them. And no one created the situation but their friends. They're contracted, they're government contract, permanently government contractor friends that aren't FBI, true, but they may as well be. But just consider them the quote crisis actor Hollywood wing of federal law enforcement avoidance. How do you avoid doing your job as law enforcement while giving the impression something's happening? Well, you recruit the criminals that you discover. You say, come on in, man. We've got a great place for you. You want a desk over here? We'll get you a new ID. You're no longer the criminal. You're now. Whoosh. They can do things like that. They're the witness relocation program. Guys, I should have witness relocation. They have never offered it to me. Why? Don't you suppose if there's somebody that's got like information on the actual mob, like the one that actually has the real power, it would be me? No, they don't even want to have an interview. But they're still looking for those capital city people, right? And since that's kind of failing in the public perception and no one's really believing it for the most, well, some people are, I guess, sadly, but more people are waking up to that that's kind of a fiction at this point. Or that they kind of constructed it, and at a bare minimum, very few authentic conservatives were involved with it, and it was mostly just a mass resonance manipulation attempt that went south. And because they couldn't get enough real people to join in their falsified thing, it looked as empty and hollow as it was. Just a lot of drama and a lot of crisis actors making up a big thing for us all to argue about. And you never get any resolution, do you? You're not going to find out who killed Ashley Babbitt. And if you do, it's just going to be something that still makes everybody angry and causes them to go off on each other. Look at the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, guys. I mean, that gave some conservatives the idea that justice was done. And what if you found out the whole thing was a crisis actor drill? I know you're going to say, like, why would they make him win? Why do you think? Because they're succeeding within the media to already spin it successfully with the people who already believe the opposing narrative that he was guilty of doing blah, 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 blah. They already believed it. So it's not going to hurt at this point to piss them off worse and get all the people who don't understand what it was, whether it was fiction or reality, out in the streets to tear shit down again. And of course, that's going to incentivize all the patriots and things like that equally, they hoped, to go down there and fight back and to hold their ground. But we're seeing all the people that are on the news right now, even for the most part, that are going down and showing out and wearing all their gear and things like that, are fake patriot movements. They're a lot closer to that Boogaloo thing that every time I look at those Boogaloo boy things, I was like, going, are you guys serious? You really do kind of seem like you're just intelligence professionals trying to blend into sort of like these pseudo-libertarian gun nuts or whatever. I don't know. I just, the use of the unicorns and everything else like that, you know, borrowing from the Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo film. Weird too, right? I was actually into that shit when I was younger. I actually liked the Breakin' movies. They had those and like, oh shit. Yeah. Anyways, there's like these ones that were just basically about the breakdancing culture. And I was like, even when I was a little kid, I was really getting into rap music and things like that. And so like it really appealed to me. But yeah, they borrowed from that the name of that group. I guess they called it that because it was like some way of communicating. Hell, I can't remember what the whole etymology of the Boogaloo. I used to know this too. There's a reason why they borrowed from it. Oh crap, I can't remember why. Anyways. Yeah, but Fred, yeah. Yeah, there's tons. Oh yeah, mini underground skyscrapers under Rattlesnake Mountain. What do you mean you just found that out, Fred? I talk about that. Fred, where you been, Fred? You haven't been around, Fred. I've been talking about that. Anyways, I'm gonna finish this, but I'll show you the maps. Oh, dude, if you really want to see where they are, like you can map them yourself. You can go into GPS locations of Nike missile silos on Wikipedia, and there's a not complete list there. It's allegedly complete, but it's not, if you ask me. Anyways, but that's the chemosphere house. That's where I was reporting from, which is why I thought this was all a little bit weird. I started off with this corporate logo thing, and then it wound up on this whole tangent involving the chemosphere house. And it turns out there was that Raphael Othello connection. And now here, Fred and I are talking about underground facilities near Othello. So bizarre, right? For those who don't know, Fred's over near the area that I'm talking about. So that's why he knows a little bit more about some of the things that I'm talking about. So I'm always glad that there's a local somebody that can actually verify some of the things that I'm talking about aren't just stories that I'm pulling out of my ass, even though I have maps that I can prove it and everything else like that. Yes, everybody knows that there's significant underground tunnels all over Richland. You know, I was recently in a conversation about this where I'm like, going, I'm sorry, like, here's my problem, guys. Like, sometimes, like, I can just, because I have been exposed to the same culture that, like, Fred, he knows. Um, Once you've been immersed in a place like that, that has that much underground activity, and it's just sort of a thing that everybody in town knows, and they might discuss it kind of like under their breath a little bit from time to time. Nobody really goes into deep discussion about it. It's like something that they're all kind of very, very willing to keep much to themselves and a secret. And or if you bring it up, they're kind of like going, let's talk about something else. It's that kind of thing. That's what I've noticed about Richland. And I did live there where Fred is at there. I mean, I lived there for a long time. I mean, I probably spent like a good 15 years of my life living there. And I'd say another several after, like, not living there. I would go back and forth working in that area doing cell tower design. So I just know a lot about the area. Plus, I was a cell phone engineer. So, like, in that area. So I know everything about these areas. In fact, Fred, I used to go to Rattlesnake Mountain. I used to go to the not quite the top, but on the hillside that's closer to right where the fence line is. Basically, I had a cell tower that right at the edge of the Hanford Nuclear Reservation as it gets up on Rattlesnake Mountain. There's two cell towers. So actually, there's three there now. A third one was built while I was working there. There might even be another one by now, but it's very, very challenging to build up there, and it's extremely windy. Like, the wind, like, will whip the door open. One dude that I worked with, kind of a oh, I'm not going to say that, but I did work with this one dude. He didn't last very long. He was a little bit too fragile for the wireless industry, I think. But um, one time, he got like a really bad like kind of a mild like back injury or whatever, because we're up at Rattlesnake Mountain. And you have to be really careful when you open the door sometimes, because the wind can just whip it open. And if you're holding on to the handle, it'll just yank your arm almost right off. You got to like let go. Or if somebody's on the other side of that, you don't want to just push that door open, because the wind thrust could make it go like, wham, and like really knock the person on their ass. So anyways, sorry about all the tangents tonight, guys. I mean to deviate too far off topic here, but anyways, getting back to Logorama. So you see how they go from the cruise car goes around the corner, and there's the Hollywood sign again. What's trippy about this is what you're seeing here on the screen animated. That's where I was when I did that thing, like this article on the chemosphere and everything like that over here, and the one that you see me here. Like, I was in this area. That's where that
Hey, everybody.
is. This.
I'm reporting from an area outside of Hollywood here.
But where you see this Hollywood sign, the cell tower and everything like that up there, I mean, those were the hills that I was on. Laurel Canyon area, Hollywood, where all that was, getting way up into the hills there and traveling around to some pretty iconic locations. Oh no, don't apologize. I get off on tangents no matter what. I'll talk about the 5G thing in a little bit if you want me to briefly. I would want to do like a whole different thing on that, and I probably should because I have enough knowledge about the wireless industry where it's not really a topic that I should ever avoid. But I'm not very much interested in doing research on it for myself. I'm far more interested in these like sort of energy things that I find within information and this type of thing. But yeah, I do kind of feel like this sort of, I guess you could say, a bit of a social responsibility to some degree to do more material on the topic that you just mentioned. So hang on. All right. So that was the Logorama thing, just to give you guys a brief whatever into it. Um, and again, I'm just going to put this playing in the background. Oops. All right. That way I won't get copyright struck. But that way you can kind of see like the general theme of this animated thing that I was doing here. And again, what I'm kind of proposing here is that there's something relative to the way we create cybernetic grids through the exposure of logos, icons, corporate, whatever you want to say. And that now that we have the internet